It's wonderful to see so many people coming to hear our dear friend Cathy Breedon present. And I'm a dietitian, and I see so many familiar faces out there, and I don't think we've had a Missoula dietitians gathering for 20 years. It's been a long time. So I hope this will be one of many. And we're so happy to introduce Cathy as our first speaker for the Childhood Obesity Prevention Summit that the Missoula Health Department and the Let's Move organization in Missoula is offering tomorrow at the university. How many of you will be coming to that? Great. I think you'll be really happy with the variety of speakers and the challenges that our speakers are going to be presenting to the community.
Are they coming to my talk?
Some might be, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The theme of our conference is captured in this little book. If you have children, you've probably all read it. It's called The Blame Game with Bernstein Bears. And part of our understanding of this obesity epidemic is that we're very able to point the finger at what's causing the problem, and it's usually never us. It's the schools or the doctors or the parents or the playgrounds or the TV. There's lots of good explanations for why we keep getting heavier and heavier. But what we're trying to do is the same point that we find in this book. It's that there's nobody really to blame. The question is, what are each of us contributing to the solution to the problem? So we're all part of the opportunity to fix the situation that we find ourselves in. Cathy Breedon is our presenter, and many of you know her. She's been coming to Montana for years to keep us updated on nutrition topics and keep us entertained at the same time. Cathy is a professor, and she's from Fargo, North Dakota. She works with the Sanford Medical Center, and she's a professional nutrition expert all over the world, and we've all enjoyed growing up with Cathy. So, Cathy Breedon.
That's not the topic, so you know. Do you want to do your So Mary put together this cute little funny introduction for Cathy, trying to help us be all at ease like an icebreaker. So we really are talking about the issue of healthy weight. Like Cathy will do it in her own way.
I'm not talking about healthy weight.
Okay, well, she's going to do her thing, we're going to enjoy it. So this is Cathy Breedon when she came into the world of food and nutrition. And this is a Cathy wannabe. This is Sunny and Sherlock. She and her husband, and now she's all grown up, and she's here to present to us this evening.
Okay, I'll just start. All right. Well, some of you know me really well, some of you never heard me before. How many of you heard me talk before? Oh, like 6? Okay. Most people haven't? Okay, and I'm hearing all of these things for the first time. They came up with the title because they needed to put something in, and it wasn't really related to what I talk about. I'm like science girl. And in real life, I work with metabolic kids and people like that, but because of the fact that insurance doesn't pay for anything I do, and the clinic can't really keep a Ph.D. clinician on staff who doesn't bring in any money, I'm a rented speaker. Which means I do about 40 workshops a year around the country, and that makes everybody happy, but it makes me happy because I'm kind of scholarly by nature, and I get to study, because most of us get our jobs can't. You're like seeing somebody else's business. Because if you're going to hang up your shingle that says nutrition and heart disease, you better study. I think what there is new. So I get to keep up on the newest stuff. I have a million handouts online that people can all have and use, and they're online. And for example, the Texas Association of Local Lit Directors has it. All my stuff is on their website. Yeah. So I'll talk about some things if you want more information on any particular thing over there. Now the question is, I was under the impression that this was a bunch of healthcare professionals. Is that true? You good with that? Okay. And then tomorrow I'm talking to everybody in the world. So I'm going to blind you with a little science, but I'll make sure it isn't too horrible. Sometimes I get all carried away because I have kids who have something really weird. And you say, well, how many kids actually have that? I keep coming across kids who have stuff, though. And I get them all over the country. And one of the things I want to talk to you about today is carnitine. Anything about that? I'm not going to talk about that tomorrow because that's something that is a science kind of thing to talk about. It's not like, if a child does, you know, that's not my thing. And I don't sell anything, I never will. And all of the stuff I tell you is off the legitimate scientific literature and not goofy stuff off the internet. Okay. You can ask me any questions anytime because it's totally informal. I have a bunch of stuff I'll talk about if nobody asks me anything. But how many know what carnitine is? A couple of people, okay? Carnitine is a substance that your body makes. It's a teeny little molecule made out of lysine and methionine, so two little essential amino acids stuck together. And the big deal is, it's a little tow truck. It's like, well, like a logging truck. You guys can identify with that one. These are from Seattle, and you have to get out of the way of them. But you picture a logging truck, and you have this big log on the back. Now, the big log is fuel, isn't it? It's fat. A fat molecule is a whole big bunch of little carbons in a row, so you think of it like a log. Like that. It's too big to get into the place where you're going to chop it up into little bits. Remember, everybody in this room has memorized and forgotten the TCA cycle many times in their life. Okay, let me just give you a little quickie review of what that's about, because it's going to show up a little later, too. I didn't figure this out when I was a student at all. It was like an epiphany when I was like 50 or something. But if you think about it, what's going on there is you've got fat and carb as your major calories. You can burn protein, but by the time you're burning protein, you chop the nitrogen off and flung it away and turn half of it into carb and half into fat. So we're really just looking at carb and fat as the fuels. And when they come into the TCA cycle in the fat form, it's a big chain of little carbons, and you can only put a 2-carbon unit into the cycle. That's an acetate. And how do you chop those up? Well, there's a pathway. There's 4 ladies in the pathway, all named Betty. Okay? There's 4 enzymes there, actually. But 4 ladies all having hatchets. And they go 1, 2, chop, 1, 2, chop. Now, A, B, chop. And then this becomes A, B, chop. So that's why it's beta. And you think of it as Betty oxidation. Okay? So beta oxidation is just chopping a fat molecule into little bits so you can fling it in the TCA cycle. And when you chop up carb, that's called glycolysis, meaning chopping up carb. Okay? All of them to make a little 2-carbon unit. You stick some CoA on there, fling it into the TCA cycle. Now, what is the TCA cycle? It's like a flywheel. It goes around and around and around and throws off sparks. Now, some folks are catching those sparks and hauling them away down to the electron transport chain. Who is doing that? Okay, here's some hints. Thiamine pyrophosphate, nucleosinamide dinucleotide, flavin mononucleotide. Those are B vitamins. Riboflavin, thiamine, thank you. Thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin, just as an example. That's one reason why B vitamins, not being where they need to be, could really screw you up in terms of energy production. And in fact, most of us learn nutrition like this, like vitamin C, scurvy, right? Niacin, pellagra. And in the absence of overt pellagra, we're not thinking about this too much. But do you remember the one for B1? It's berry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And berry, oh, another one, okay. Berry is a Polynesian word that means, I can't. Because you can't. See if this makes this work out. We'll put that in the back here. I have to do it like this so it doesn't stick all over. Well, we'll just try it. Is it on already? Yeah. Okay. I'm really not very fat. This is all just equipment in the trunk. Yeah, you might wonder why I was coming to talk about fat anyway. Well, I'm actually the poster child. Okay. Somebody's got to do it. God, I can't get this in here. This is all being taped. And here she can't even figure out how to, no. All right. So anyway, we're looking at the fact, oh, now the other one came off. We're looking at the fact that nutrients of different types are required in order for all those little pathways we memorized to work. And for example, if you didn't have any iron, what would happen to your electron transport chain? Yep, all the cytochromes go, no, right, okay. So you have to have all the stuff you need. Now, it turns out when you're flinging all of that off, you capture the sparks, you take them down, now you move them down the electron transport chain, which is essentially a sandbagging operation. It just moves things along. I used to use an example, the old movie, or the old TV show Bonanza. Do any of you know that show? 5 people, okay. They always had a fire in the barn, and little Joe and Hoss and Adam and Paul had to go out there and have a bucket brigade. Okay, to put that was, but my students don't know what that is. But I finally figured out one other example you can use for that is carrying the torch for the Olympics. If you're taking that spark along and you give it to the next guy and he gives it to the next guy. So that's what you're doing. And then at the very bottom, there's something, oxidative phosphorylation. What you're going to do there is make the energy into the form where you can get at it. So you have 2 little batteries. And that's called a double pack, ADP. Okay. And you got another little P there, little battery. And what you want to do is capture this spark and shove it in there and stick that other battery there. So then you have a triple pack, right? ATP. And that's what you brush your teeth with that. You know, that's what you use. You break one off and fling out the energy so you can use it. Now, before we ever got to any of this stuff, you have to get that fat into the mitochondria, don't you? Yeah, mitochondrial membrane is like where all this action's going on. But you have to haul that fat across there, and it's too big unless it's hauled in by the truck, which is carnitine. Now picture that little truck is having on the door the Cartitin Trucking Company. Okay, carnitine, cartitin. That's what it does. Now, where do you get this carnitine? You make your own. You make it in your liver, you make it in your kidney, you make it in your brain. And it's looking like it's a thing that some people don't make as well as others. And it's a thing that some people forget to make as they get older. Like we forget to make vitamin D, we forget to make thyroid hormone, we forget to make babies. I mean, all of these things just go away gradually. But it's one of the areas where, because of the nature of my kids, some of the symptoms that kids have that are sent to me, I see things that are symptomatic of potentially carnitine deficiency. Now, one of those things can be big-time weight problems, but some other ones too, because let's talk about this. If you can't burn fat for fuel, your muscles are going to be crummy. Your muscles, when you're doing exercises like throwing a baseball, that's glycolysis, that's carb, wink. But if you're going to do any kind of endurance exercise, you're burning fat and your muscles prefer that. But they can't. They can't get any fat in there because they can't get it in without carnitine. So one of the things I see in children like that, or adults, if I talk to some adults, mostly children, is that they have horrible exercise tolerance. And it never gets any better. Now I want you to picture, and they also have, if you eat some food, where's that fat going to go? Well, on your body, and then you're supposed to burn it off later. You can't, because you can't burn it. So it's like, and then your brain says, excuse me, I asked for some fuel, and so you're still hungry. So when you see kids, and adults for that matter like this, who are people who are kind of fluffy, and who are hungry a lot and fight that all the time, and they are called couch potatoes. They may not want to be a couch potato. Some kids are couch potatoes because they can't help it. And I have so many kids in my practice and kids that I see around, I describe this stuff, people call me, I tried that on that kid, and, you know. Lots of kids are out there, we just don't have it in our radar. So I want you to have it in your radar because there are some kids you can really seriously help with this. And I'm not saying that all fat children have that, no. But there's some children that you will just beat your brains out trying to help them and you'll fail. Unless you know the little trick that there might be this other thing going on. So one of the pictures that you can have in your mind of the carnitine deficient person is, you know, in the movie, any movie, like, remember the movie Goonies? They had a kid named Porky or something. There's always some fat kid with fat red face, and they're running around the track or doing some activities, and he's keeping up the rear and goes, and he's bright red, and everybody's, oh God, what a little pig, right? And it's very funny. How come all the other kids get better and better and better? And he never gets any better at running around the track. Because the reason he can't exercise enough to actually build more muscle, because his muscles have got no fuel. Okay? So that kind of a kid will have an exercise intolerance of that type. Now, just to give you an example of how hard this can be to see sometimes, I had a little girl who had a metabolic disease of a different type, but it involved needing carnitine also, different kind of thing. But she had a half-brother who was a high school boy. And the mom told me, she says, you know, Roger, he asked me to rub his butt after football practice because it hurt so bad. Is that a normal teenage boy activity? No, but he was desperate. His muscles hurt a lot. Muscle pain is another thing you might see. And then I was asking him some stuff, and I thought, well, he certainly has some of the genes this little kid has. And it turned out Mom had the same thing. Mom had been a cheerleader in high school. After cheering, she would be noodle girl for 2 days because she just could barely make it through and then didn't have any more. But nobody had ever diagnosed anything, but that picture was quite a nice little family thing. So I went to a doctor that was working with the little girl, and I said, could we do a carnitine test on this guy? And he said, well, he's not carnitine deficient. He's a big guy, but he's not like wildly fat or anything. He's a big guy. He said, he's an athlete. He's on the football team. He's on the track team. I said, well, did you ask him what he does on the football team? On the football team, he's a wall. He can't run around the track. He cannot run around the track. We talked about this. He can't. He does everything he can to dodge it because he's a lazy couch potato boy. And on the track team, he's the shot put. Glycolysis. He's found a way to live in the world where he does what he can do, but he cannot do the activity of other children. He's fine now, by the way. Now, so carnitine, I mean, would you ever think of that looking at this boy? No, but I want you to realize these are how it can manifest itself. You can have extreme muscle weakness, floppiness in some kids. Some are not fat because they have the ability to burn some fat in some tissues but not others. One little boy was 16 months old, cute little stinker, but he was crabby and he demanded to be carried always. And his mom was like, you know, and he just would not be down without having a big fit. And I said, okay, well, he seems kind of low muscle tone to me, so let's do this. We'll do a little trial. If you were out at West Acres, which is our mall, how far could you go from the food court before he'd have to demand to be picked up? And she said, oh God, we wouldn't get out of the food court. I said, okay, that's your comparison model now. Then we did a carnitine trial with physician supervision. I always do that. I'm just saying, I'm the one poking about it, but they have to order it. But, so we did a carnitine trial. And a month later, she went out to West Acres and he walked all the way to the Penny's Wing and back. That's a long ways. Because he wasn't a crabby little boy, he was a weak little boy. And he was, you know, she had had to buy a double stroller because there was another baby and this guy had to be in a stroller. You know, but we just, he is such a lazy little butt. So I want you to try to be a little less judgmental about that. And in the extreme, think about adults you've seen. Have you ever seen a guy on TV being hauled into the hospital? He weighs 600 pounds, and they had to break down the door or something, and so it's on CNN. And he's still eating. He's got a hamburger in his mouth even while they're filming. And everybody goes, what a pig. And I go, what a metabolic disease. You can't weigh 600 pounds. I've tried. No, I mean, you know, I just stay always the same no matter what I do. You know, how about you guys change your size like randomly, wildly all the time? No, what is that? But these guys just put it on. Their brain says, I need some fuel to run my show here. Anything that they don't use that moment, even if it's carb, you turn it to fat, and then it's yours to keep. So weak muscles, excessive fat, very poor tolerance of energy that would be a fat-burning type of aerobic exercise, essentially. Those kind of things. Do you ever see people that have something called Prader-Willi syndrome? Yeah, now Prader-Willi, not everybody has Prader-Willi, of course, but those children have a very classic picture, which most nutrition people have seen in their home ec book or something at least. The kids are missing a little piece of a number 15 chromosome. So we don't know, it depends how big the piece is, you know, how much the problem are. But the traditional pattern of this is that they're very floppy as infants. They can't even suck. They almost always need to have a G-tube at birth because they can't suck. By the time they're a year, they get strong enough to suck, and then something else happens. Then they start to put on weight, put on weight, put on weight. And the classic person with that who's 10 years old is hugely fat, with low muscle tone and hungry all the time, to the point that he's eating dog food and he's eating the garbage. And the parents are told by us helpful folks, you just need to make sure she doesn't get into that food because she'll gain weight. You just need to lock your cupboards and tell her no. Can you imagine being the mother who had to tell a child who's begging for food? No. We just put that on them. That's what we've done for years. Well, the cool thing is this. A whole lot of the kids with that respond to a combination of CoQ10 and carnitine. Because they're so, and it's not, I don't know what the mechanism is, but I know that the symptoms are just like it, you know? And so I have some kiddos who are different ages now, and they're not fat. Now, I get kids sent to me who are wildly fat, and it's kind of like past the point that you can really prevent stuff. However, if you know that some people have that pattern, they don't have Prader-Willi necessarily, but they got something that makes that pattern. It could be carnitine, and a trial is what you want to do. In the olden days, I used to get a level on kids, but it turns out the level in your blood does not reflect the tissue level. So if it comes back low, of course I'll give them some. But if it comes back normal, I'll think they're fine and I won't give them any, but they're symptomatic. See, so, and it's very benign stuff, very benign. So I can just do a trial, see what happens. And I have a whole paper online just on carnitine with all of the details if anybody wants to do any of that stuff. And then I also have papers, like there's a diabetes one that talks about carnitine. It's got big roles in diabetes, it's got big roles in macular degeneration and in maintenance of intellectual function. I like that one. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I'm 62, by the way, so I mean, it's like, I need to think about these things. Anyway, so what happens is, we have kids in the world who are fluffy. Some have a syndrome with a name to it that you can check their chromosomes and tell what it is. But if the kid is just acting like that, I'll tell you about another little boy. I saw this boy because he was 16, and they were talking about starting a teenage gastric bypass program. Okay, we got some issues here, lots, but the boy was sent to us to be worked up for that, which of course we didn't even do there. So they said, would you go look at that boy? So I went up there, and here's this boy. He's shorter than me. He's 16. He's round as a ball. His mommy is sitting there in the chair and round as a ball, and her little feet are not touching the ground. And then here's Dad, stick boy. So what's happened is people assume that mom is feeding the child wrong. If she's feeding the child wrong, why does he look like this? You know, if it's like large city at their home, you know. And she's always trying to do low weight, low fat, all of this stuff. But they are really, really hungry all the time. And so I thought, oh, he looks like a candidate. It looks like it might be something genetic, I don't know what, but they maybe don't do this thing very well. So I asked him, I said, you know, when you're like in gym class or stuff, if you're like running around the track, are you pretty good at that? Do you exercise pretty good? And he said, yes, I exercise all the time. I said, oh, you do? Cool. Okay, so yeah, because exercise is really important for health and everything, so I'm glad to hear you're doing that. And he said, oh, I do it all the time, I exercise all the time. I said, okay, well, that's good. The reason I was asking, though, is because I actually know some kids who can't exercise. And that means they can't do what they'd like to do to exercise, and they can't lose weight. But you're not that kind of kid, so that's fine. I just wanted to check to make sure that wasn't you. And he started to cry, and he said, I'm lying to you. I just say, I exercise, get off my back, because he just gets yelled at and yelled at and yelled at. So I've had so many kids who've been accused of being couch potatoes. And when we finally begged somebody to do a trial, those kids have a totally different thing. This first happened, I was doing a workshop in Wisconsin about 10 years ago about special needs kids. And it turned out this lady who was driving me back to the plane said, you know that carnitine, I was talking about carnitine because the drug Depakote, which is valproic acid, the seizure med, tells your body to quit making carnitine. So hey, guess what some of the symptoms are of Depakote? Lethargy, weight gain, yeah. Anyway, but also not having enough carnitine makes it much more toxic to the liver. And it also makes the drug not work well because the drug itself requires carnitine to be hauled into where it needs to go. So you have breakthrough seizures and stuff. I mean, so this is like a perfectly fine drug for certain things, but you gotta give them carnitine. Anyway, so that's what I was telling him. So she said, do you think that carnitine stuff would help my kids? I said, I don't know, what's the matter with your kids? And she described them. They were high school kids, really, really, really fat, Really, really, really low muscle tone. The girl would come home from school and sleep for 4 hours. So that kind of picture you see too. And also she would walk right through a mud puddle rather than walk around it because it was less energy to expend. Yeah. And anyway, those kind of things were going on. So I said, well, have they been worked up for anything? And she said, well, yeah, they were at Mayo and they got told that what we have here is familial hypotonia. That's not a diagnosis, that's a description. That says you're floppy and it's in your family. It doesn't tell you why. And I said, I don't know. There's some stuff I know that might help. I'll do everything I know that might help, that's safe and everything. So my first carnitine paper I wrote for that family's doctor. All of the data at that point, all of the ways you might do it, what are the issues. Well, this girl had always wanted to be a veterinarian, but she couldn't even get on a horse. She wanted to be a horse rider, you know, but she couldn't get her butt up there. I mean, it was just awful. And the bottom line now is she's a young adult mother with 2 children, and she's a veterinarian and normal weight. Yeah, and I've often wondered about that because what are the odds? I'm in that spot talking about that thing, and that mom's a car driver. Blink, you know what I mean? So that was where I thought, well, that's got to be rare. It's not rare. I saw one in Texas, just like in Houston actually, just last summer. I was talking about this, and this mom came up and she said, do you think that would help my son? I mean, people are desperate to help their kids. And I said, well, I don't know, but here's what we can do, and you can do a trial. But it turned out he really wants to be, he was graduating from high school, he really wants to be an oceanographer. But he says, Mom, I know I'm too weak to do that. He's coming home, going to bed at 9 o'clock. He can't work hard for more than just a short period of time, and he wants to be hauling ropes around out on ships, and he says, I know I just can't do it. I'm going to have to be some kind of stupid calculus major or something and sit on a bench. So we did a trial, and she emailed me a few months later that he's going to be an oceanographer when he goes to college this fall. So there are kids. I keep finding them. If you have your eyes open, I bet you'll find them too.
If the testing is inaccurate to really tell us what to do, how much do you dose them with?
Well, that's what I'm telling you. My handout gives all of that information. It's 50 to 100 milligrams per kilo per day, divided into 3 doses so you don't have osmotic diarrhea. And it's benign. And it says max 3,000. Now, the max 3,000 is not based on anything. It's just like, that should be enough. That big boy I was talking about, the big boy I was talking about from Wisconsin, he's, by the way, a normal weight guy, too, and he just finished college, and he's cruising for chicks. But that boy needed 6,000 to get him started. And the reason is, it's per body weight, and he's big. Why would I give him the baby 50 to 100 milligrams per kilo per day, max 3,000? You know, so if you know about this stuff and you know what's dangerous and not dangerous, and my paper talks about all of that. But I want you to think about this in terms of gastric bypass now. Do you think any of the people who are just wildly fat and can't stop eating and are not exercising, do you suppose any of them might have a problem with that? So the solution would be to do gastric bypass so they can't eat so much. The problem is there are some people for whom that works slick, and there are some people hiding out in there who have a metabolic disorder that is not corrected by gastric bypass. You just made it harder for them to not feel starved all the time. And what happens is, one thing you can see in that pattern is they don't heal up very well because they got no fuel, you know. Another thing is, that's the kind of person who very often will have, have you ever heard of people having 2 gastric bypasses? A repeat? Yeah. Why on earth? And people blame them. They'll say, oh, she has no self-respect. You'd think after she lost all of that weight she wouldn't gain it back, but look what she did. What a pig. I think that lady is very likely the one who is totally driven to eat more than, to find some way around the gastric bypass because her brain is saying he's starving. I mean, when you talk to the Prader-Willi moms, you say, think of how the hungriest you've ever felt in your whole life. And he feels like that every single day. And nobody will help him out. So it's not just the Prader-Willis. That's just one group for whom there's some history that people know about. And we have all of our kids starting on that right away. And here's a cool thing, too. The hypotonia piece, I was talking about how they have to have a G-tube as a baby because they can't suck. No, my babies go home fed because I fix their hypotonia with carnitine. So hypotonia is a symptom that could be from any number of things, but this is a big carnitine guy, if you see that. Another example, I had a little baby with Down syndrome. She was 3 and she couldn't sit up yet. Now, kids with Down syndrome are kind of floppy anyway, and they have an extra chromosome in every cell, so Lord knows what's going on there. But some of them are like all over the place, and some of them are like that. And she was just totally, I'd never seen one so flat, you know. So what it turned out is, I think she had something else too. You know, that you can have more than one thing. Okay. Because I was explaining all of this to the mom, I said, I'd like to do a trial on carnitine to just see if that's in her way for some reason, because she is so low tone. It'll either help or it won't. But I want to try that. And I was describing all of the reasons and stuff, because they're very intelligent parents, and I don't just say, oh, there, little lady. You know, I said, here's what we're doing and why. And they said, that sounds just like our other daughter. And I said, well, what's your other daughter like? And she's like 9 years old, and she's not fat, but she's very hypotonic. She can't ride a bicycle without training wheels. And she's mortified about that. It is socially really damning for her to have to ride with training wheels. All the other kids are riding all around her. She just can't keep her balance. And then she can't walk upstairs except going 1, 1, 1. She can't walk like that. And the thing that was so interesting to me is children find such ways to be adaptive to their situation. At the dinner table, she can't eat unless she's holding onto the table. She has to stabilize herself to eat. Just like we'd put little kids with a towel behind them in the chair so they don't, like that, okay. So she had found a way to get by, and that was to stabilize herself there. So we did a trial, and the answer is, she's fine. So there are people hiding out with stuff. Hypotonia, excessive weight gain, particularly when there's a lot of hunger involved too. It makes you suspicious that they can't get fuel. I mean, your body's first need is always for fuel. Did you know that? It's not for oxygen. If you got no fuel, you can't beat your heart. It doesn't matter. Okay? Oxygen doesn't do any good if you can't move around. So what that means is you'll burn whatever you can, but if mostly like half your calories come from fat, sort of indirectly or not, and you can't burn those, I mean, you're going to have some serious trouble there. Anyway, so that's one of the things I want people to be aware of. There's a whole lot more detail in there. I'm not going to just talk about that tonight, though. But keep your antenna up, because there's going to be those kids in your program who fail because they're just too darn lazy. And I have to tell you something else about that, too. Yes?
I just had a quick question on, you had said that when people go on valproic acid that they get those symptoms,
lethargy and weight gain. Those are the classics in the PDR, yeah.
What about, is there any relationship between carnitine and antidepressants that people tend to do?
I haven't seen any.
Increased weight gain, increased appetite?
Oh, you mean like, yeah, no, I haven't seen any studies of that, but certainly some of the earlier products that they were used, some of the antidepressants of the olden days that you had to have all those weird diets. What was that called? Yeah, the MAO diet, monoamine oxidase inhibitor diet, 100 years ago. Anyway, that's, if you use certain medications, it could interact with that. So you can't eat any banana peels, remember that? No overripe banana peels. That was in the list, I can't help it. But anyway, yeah, those kind of drugs though, I'm not a drug person if I'm not working with somebody who has it, but those kind of drugs do associate with big time weight gain. And thinking about that, I screen for research on carnitine all the time, and I've never had that one pop up. So if I just say carnitine, what's new this month, you know, and there's tons in the diabetes world, and there's tons in all these other worlds. But we're here talking about fat kids, fat adults, so that's why I'm focusing on that. It wouldn't hurt to do a trial if you have somebody who is that way. I mean, seriously. Well, it's because of her drug. Yeah, why? Don't know. Make sure it's not that, yeah.
I just wanted to testify that I did put my daughter on it, and within 2 weeks she lost 5 pounds. She was way more energetic.
How'd you know about it? Oh, thank you.
And her physician wanted the references. I gave him the article on carnitine, but at the end of the article there were no references on that particular one.
On the one he had, yeah. I have big lists of carnitine by diabetes abstracts and carnitine by this abstracts. I don't usually have them attached to the paper, but I certainly have them if he wants them.
Well, I gave him the ones on the diabetes handout, and when I go to PubMed and put it in, then I couldn't, I'm seeing what she's seeing, and she's not trusting me or believing me. But my daughter said, all I can testify is that I'm losing weight and I feel weight.
Yeah, and she doesn't feel as hungry, so she has more energy to for one thing, but also more interest in stuff. The Prader-Willi kids spend so much of their time hunting for a loaf of bread that somebody left out. And they're not learning and they're not participating. So taking them away from that starvation mode. I mean, just think if you're starving, you're not farting around coming to a meeting, you're looking for food, right? Okay.
I don't think she had it really overate, it was actually physical.
That she couldn't keep up. Yeah, and see, some kids are fluffy, some are just floppy. I don't want to label anybody, but those are the key guys. They just never get any better, even when she tries to do stuff. Maybe she can do certain kinds of things. She can shoot baskets. Yeah, okay, but she can't run track. Yeah.
What's the trial entail?
Oh, well, you just give them some. It's it's over the counter. No, that's what I'm saying. You can test, but if it's low, you'll give them some, and if it's not low, but they're symptomatic, you'll give them some. So I just don't bother with that anymore because it's not telling me anything, and it costs some money. So the handout gives every detail of how to do this, but you just get an oral form of it. There's liquids, there's powders, there's pills, and you spread it out, and you just be sure they take it. And then you set some goals up front that say, okay, what do I think are the symptoms that are making me think this kid has a problem here? How long can you walk on the treadmill, Muriel? 5, okay? That's our starting point. You know, how far can you walk at West Acres? Find something that you think is, how much TV time? We know TV time is evil, right? TV time is evil. You know this, right? If you don't have anything that you can do physically, I think TV is pretty good, don't you think? So we think that hanging out and watching TV causes weight, and it certainly can. But for some kids, it's because they can't do anything else. And a little compassion is in order there. Yeah, and they do change. That one girl I was talking about, well, one girl, she's out terrorizing the community on her bicycle now. And she was, it took forever to get the doctor to do a trial with her, because he was kind of, I don't believe in that. And I say, you know, I don't believe in supplements. I say, it's not a religion, okay? It's just science. Here's all the references. And he knows tons more stuff than I know about other stuff, but this is my little thing. I know this little thing. Trust me on this one. Yeah. Yeah.
Since carnitine is a supplement, how do you find a reliable source of it? I mean, when you go in...
Well, the form that's from a computer, or the prescription one is Sigma-Tau Pharmaceuticals makes Carnitor. So if you really want to do a test and you want to know for darn sure they're getting that kind, I often use that in the trial, also because insurance will pay for it if the doctor ordered it, because insurance doesn't pay for anything over the counter. Once we figure out if carnitine's a helpful thing for somebody, then we can do a trial just separating or trying out a new product that they buy, you know, getting twin labs online and at Amazon.com. You know, there's brands all over the place. Oh, one little thing, acetyl-CoA, I keep doing that. Acetyl-carnitine is a little better absorbed than just plain old L-carnitine. So that acetyl is like 2 little carbons, right, still stuck on there. It's like it's a little handle or something, you can pull it in better. For whatever reason, that's a little better in some research absorbed. It's not wildly good, well absorbed otherwise. So that's why you probably have to give so much. But you can set your, like here's what I do on a trial. If I say that a little kid, if the range for kids is 50 to 100 per kilo, I'll start at 100. Don't you have to work up? No, my model is that the kid's got none. And if I start too low, I won't see anything. And then I say, oh, nah, that wouldn't help. You know? So this is not scary. I'm just saying I want to see if I get a change. Yeah.
So I have a floppy and fluffy baby that came to me at 4 months old that I actually thought might have been Prader-Willi or suck. And we give carnitine to our preemies all the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they can't make their own.
But I've never seen an infant on carnitine, and it would be very short stature with no explanation for her short stature, and just floppy and no syndrome.
Yeah, she could be any number of things, because, but she's certainly worth a trial. Absolutely, you can do tremendous good for her if that's a problem.
You started 100 milligrams per kilogram.
Well, you know, whatever your docs are doing there, you know, I mean. I will explain to them why I'm doing that, because I'm doing a trial. I'm not giving her that treatment for the rest of her life. I want to see if we see some movement, because what we often see is within a few days they feel different, they act different. The carnitine problem in preemies is related to the immaturity, and the same exact thing happens in old guys. Like, you can't make it because you're too young, you can't make it because you're too old. And they're looking at that, as I mentioned, for maintenance of cognition. But I do want to tell you a little private story about this. Because I was talking about that at a lot of workshops, and a friend of mine is a dietitian I work with who is not overweight, but she's 40 and she's trying to exercise and stuff. And she says, you know, I always go to the gym, and here's all these little chickies and they're dancing around going, ooh, endorphins, endorphins, I feel so good, you know. And she's like, you know, she says, I am like noodle girl, and I don't recover for 4 to 5 hours after exercising. It is totally unenjoyable, and I try to do it because you're supposed to. And she said, and then I thought about, you're always talking about that carnitine stuff, and those are the things I'm looking at here. So she tried it on herself. And she immediately lost some weight. She was, you know, middle-aged, so she had a little bit. She lost some weight, and she loves her exercise class now, and she can dance all the time. Now, what struck me about that is, I never thought about that in just folks that weren't wildly fat or something wrong with them. And then I realized that I have that myself. I'll give you a little history. When I was in grade school, I was such a good pitcher. I was the pitcher on the boys, 6th grade boys baseball team, and I was in the 4th grade. Glycolysis, with good aim, okay? I could not run around the track. I was that wheezing kid going, and I was diagnosed as having exercise-induced asthma. What I had was, your diaphragm's not working anymore, honey. You can't breathe. You breathe by moving your diaphragm. If you can't move it, you can't breathe. I always felt like I was suffocating. I was. And mostly, the other thing was I never got any better. We ran around the stupid school every day, and every day humiliating things like that happened. Now, so then I became more scholarly, right? Because you got to do something. So sometimes you say, well, she just reads all the time. Why is she reading all the time? You know, maybe because she can't do something else. But here's the deal that really convinced me about it. I hadn't thought about this. But I had cancer 15 years ago, and had breast cancer, little tiny breast cancer with 19 lymph nodes already. So they did an experimental stem cell transplant. That picture you saw of me and my husband, I had lost all my hair, and so we had a big thing in the hospital with different wigs I should try out. And they voted, and that was the one that won. Everybody liked the Sonny and Cher look. I've never been so thin, you know. But yeah, so that was not when I was growing up, really. I was that age, I guess, but that's him and me pasted on there. But you know, can you help this lady with her fashion issues, you know? And they had all these different ones, Miss Piggy hairdo and all these things. But I was sick, and I was really sick, and I couldn't eat, because they give you 30 times normal chemo all in one day. And then hopefully you get some cells back and you set up camp, and if they work, you're good. And I'm fine, and I recovered very nicely in half the time. However, I was getting ready to go home. I could never eat more than 300 calories a day, no matter what. I tried desperately. So I'm trying to put some books in a box, trying to get back into the world. And I tried to get up again, and you know those little dolls where you push on the bottom and they go, woo? That's what I did, pew, off to the side. And it turned out, I mean, I knew I lost quite a bit of weight. I didn't lose a drop of fat. I lost all my muscles. All my leg muscles had gone away. Yes. Nobody noticed, and I didn't, because my brain was fried. You know, I should have said, now that's metabolically odd, don't you think? I mean, nobody would do that, but I did that. And so that made me think, hey, I wonder if I have this, you know. The other thing that has been true until about the last, I've only been doing anything with carnitine for the last couple of years for myself. But the one thing that's always the bane of my existence is I travel a lot, and there's always a late plane, and you have to run through the airport. It's a near fatal experience. It involves and stuff, and old ladies running with luggage and falling down. No, I mean, it's horrible. It's the worst thing. I lost some weight after I started taking carnitine, just but like 15 pounds, and I stayed right where I am. So this is, God said you should be a 16, and that's fine. I'm not date bait, don't care. But what I can now do is run through the airport without humiliating events. So I mean, so people have different things, but here's the deal. I was talking about the elderly. There was a lot of data like that, and I was looking at more things, and I thought, my mom is related to me. My mom is 85 years old. And she's just a really smart, into everything kind of thing. But I thought, I'm just going to do a little trial here with her. And I gave her some carnitine, and I told her what to do, but I never told her why in the slightest. I said, I just want you to take, she takes whatever I tell her, you know. And so she did, and a couple of weeks later I said, okay, notice anything? Anything? Give you gas? Anything? And she said, well, let me think about this. And she's real smart, so she thought about it. And she said, you know, I was taking 3 naps a day, but this last week I've just been taking 1 nap a day. And then she said, and the reason I can do that is because I stay out and play in the garden way longer than I could do before. I used to be out there for 20 minutes and then have to come in and take a nap for an hour and be exhausted. And she said, I can work way longer and I can do more physical stuff, and then when I do come in, I'm not exhausted. And the other thing that was interesting is that she was always crossword puzzle queen. You know, she had a crossword puzzle on her chair, you know, all of her life. And I hadn't noticed, but for like the last 4 months, it was the same crossword puzzle. She'd kind of just, hadn't done it. And I didn't notice that, but she said, but you know, I didn't tell you, but it was the same one. And then she said, but I've been doing 3 a day ever since. Now, that's anecdotal data right up front, okay? But what I'm saying is, the manifestation of this problem can affect people when you say, oh, she's old. What is old? You quit making carnitine. No, I don't know. I mean, so, but it looks like some people do, in fact, do that. They quit making testosterone, they quit making estrogen, they quit making all kinds of stuff, thyroid hormone. So it's just a piece of the puzzle. And in old people, that could certainly be part of why they slow down and why they're weak and why they fall and all of those things. But we're looking at kids mostly here. So just looking at them with a different eye, if they're not just chubby and running all over the place, then they might need a little closer look there. And you can certainly talk to their doctor, and you can read the thing, and I'll talk to their doctor too, it doesn't matter, because it's really worth it. You can save their life, seriously. That, you know, the boy I was talking about that was going to be an oceanographer now, one of the other clues in that one was, she said his brothers are all athletes, they're tall and they're athletic, and his grandpa was known as the laziest man in Texas, because he was always just lying around and he was never doing anything, just lying around. And he died quite young, in his 40s, of cardiomyopathy. One of the symptoms of big-time deficiency of carnitine is cardiomyopathy. So, yeah, anyway. So there are some people, look for patterns. All right, now, I need to talk some more about other stuff, don't I? But I have to talk about the same stuff I'm talking about tomorrow, because you're all going to be there? Everybody? No? Who's not? 4 people. Yeah.
Are there any anabolic pathway adaptations that you see in people that are carnitine deficient?
I don't know. He has well, I mean, you certainly are able to do things that require glycolysis, which is the only anaerobic guy you got. The whole TCA cycle is aerobic. Beta oxidation is aerobic. Glycolysis is 2/3 anaerobic, and the last piece is aerobic. Right. So I imagine that the adaptation is that you would move toward exercise that allows you to succeed with just a glycolysis kind of thing, but I don't know of any adaptation in terms of becoming good at something. Doesn't mean there isn't, I just don't know. I don't know. Yeah?
You can tell me just to go read the article.
Go read the article.
But I'm not an interest.
Oh, okay, okay.
Another interest. Are there other disease entities that are more likely to have carnitine deficiency?
Entities?
You know, like she was saying, you know, with the antidepressants.
Oh, well, the antidepressants was not one of them, just so you know.
Yeah, diabetes? Or
yeah, diabetes. I have a whole thing on diabetes and carnitine, and I'll give you an example of that, not from the fat kid scenario, but from the type 1 diabetes situation. In 1989, there was a study at a camp for kids with diabetes where they were poking them for general reasons, and for some reason, they poked them and checked their carnitine level, which nobody was ever doing. Somebody got to be in their bonnet. Anyway, they found 7% of the kids had no carnitine on board that they could find. They were deficient. Now, let's think this through. How many children should be low in something that your body makes? None. You should expect Zippo there. And I'm telling you that some kids don't even show up that are low, but they found 7% of those children. And I never saw anything happen with that, but I'm like, whoa. Because then the thing that you would see if that was the case, if you ever have a kid who has diabetes and they're farting around and they're not doing the diet, you have all kinds of reasons for things to be goofy. But what if you have the perfect girl? She's in the 5th grade, she's really smart, she aces everything, she's really good, she does her diet every day, the teacher sees her mother sees her, she does not cheat, she knows her stuff. And she has events, all kinds of wacky blood sugar levels throughout the day, like 2 or 3 times a day, in spite of doing everything right. Now traditionally what we do is yell at them because, well, you must not be doing it right, you know. But what got my attention about this girl is that her teacher was my friend. And she called me up, she said, this girl scares the crap out of me. I have to take her on an overnight in the 5th grade. And God, she could have reactions. She always has reactions. I don't know if I'm up for that. And I don't want to tell her she can't go on the big trip for the class. So I said, well, let's do this. Let me talk to her mom. And then we ended up talking to her doctor, and we did a trial, and it fixed it. Now, why would that be? Let's walk that through a little bit. She was not particularly fat, but she was eating this really healthy diet in spite of being hungry. But what was happening there is you can't fast if you can't burn fat. Your body's first need is for energy, right? You run out of fuel in Montana in the winter, you burn the furniture, right? Yeah, I mean, you got to do that thing. So she's got to burn something. And here she is, she's got fat, she's got carbs, she's got this stuff floating around in her blood. And we have like dual heat. We shift gears from burning carb to burning fat for fasting. She can't do that. So she has to burn carbs she can't afford to burn. Drops to a low level. So she has a low level. And then her liver, or her pancreas, liver, I guess, her liver says, her pancreas says, glucagon comes running out. What is glucagon? Remember that? It's a hormone that says glucose is gone. Okay, you know that one? Yeah. Anyway, I have to have things to help me remember this stuff. Okay. But anyway, so glucagon comes out of your pancreas and tells your liver to chop up some glycogen into bits so you can throw some glucose out there. Then she wakes up in the morning with a high level. We used to call that the Somogi response, didn't we? And it's just like, it's mysterious. Actually, there's a ton of data on little kid diabetes and carnitine. I have a whole big raft of abstracts on that, and you're welcome to have them if you want them. Otherwise, you can look on anything. And I'm not making this stuff up. Okay, yeah?
What about kids that are otherwise just sort of not that crazy, whatever typical thought is, but they're just a little less active and less, maybe they eat a little more. What about those kind of kids?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm only looking at kids that are like so troubled that they get my attention. So let's ask this question. Could a person who is a healthcare professional, now I know that if you're not a physician you can't do squat, we know this, but assume you're a physician and you have this kid and you just wonder that she just seems to be, I have a lot of kids that are hypotonic for one reason or another, and they have this or that thing going on. Mitochondrial diseases, they absolutely totally need carnitine. You know, so what happens is you could always do a trial. It will either help or it won't. You know what you're looking to have change. It'll either help or it won't. If it didn't help, okay, it won't that. But it's a tool you can have in your toolbox, and you can save lives with that. Yeah.
Do you ever see any negative effects from the carnitine?
Well, okay, here are the negative effects of carnitine. Da, 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 da. Carnitine is a tiny little molecule, so if you put it in some liquid, it's a big-time osmotic effect, right? And so that's why they say to divide it into 3 doses, because if you give them all at once, you can have an osmotic diarrhea. That's really about it. What happens if you give them too much is they start to smell like a little fishy. And we actually use that clinically, because I have some little kid, they're responding beautifully to the carnitine, we're giving him quite a lot, we're giving 100 per kilo, but we don't anticipate he will always need 100 per kilo, but I don't know when that will change. When is he full? So I say, okay, you call me if he starts to smell like a little fishy. And they call me and say, yeah, he smells like a fish. Okay, but we'll back it down by a nickel. And then we found it. Okay, so that's the worst case scenario. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Anyway.
So if they smell like a fish, they're getting too much then?
Yeah, because and it's not anything bad happening. It's just that if you don't need it, you excrete it in a pathway that stinks. Okay, yeah. So it's pretty benign, and certainly what is not benign is failing to address it. Now, until recently, it was perceived that there was no such thing as a primary carnitine synthetase deficiency, that there was not anybody who just can't make any. That just didn't happen. Actually, 3 weeks after we started our enhanced newborn screening, I got my first little girl with primary carnitine synthetase deficiency. The reason that we never saw them before is because they were SIDS babies. They're fine, fine, fine till they get sick and they have to fast or something. This little girl lives in Bismarck, and she's 3 and she's a little princess and she can do anything she wants to do. She can be a physician, she can be an athlete, she can be a mommy. She just has to take carnitine. So, you know, there's plenty of things. The other thing that I find interesting is when we're saying that a person might have an inadequate amount of an important metabolic agent, we say, oh, well, he shouldn't need that. Well, if somebody said, he has diabetes, he needs insulin, you don't say, make your own damn insulin. I mean, put it in that category. We all make it. Some of us aren't so good at it. And we're just finding out that it's probably quite a lot of folks. And one of the things that we might think about just in terms of aging and middle age spread and all of those kind of things. Oh, speaking of middle age spread, I should talk about my husband. My husband is 67, and he's always been stick boy. When I married him, he was 5'10" and 145 pounds. And we're like a size 20-inch waist or something. He had just gotten out of Vietnam and he came home to California and he'd let his hair grow because he'd been, you know, so it was curly, curly, blonde, blonde, blonde. And my brother said, that guy you're going with looks like a frayed Q-tip. You know? But we've been married for 40 years. And in the last maybe 10 years, he's kind of put a little weight on. Not like other people. He has a little tummy, but he wears a 36 waist. Is that huge? No, lots of people have way more than 36, okay? It's not like that, it's just, but it's a lot for him. And so he had noticed what happened when I tried stuff, so he said, maybe I should try that. I said, well, it won't hurt anything, go ahead. And he did, and he lost that weight. So is it because he got older and just quit being as good at making it, or something else? Lord knows. I mean, I'm just making up an explanation. But the other thing that was interesting is he's not Mr. Macho, he's a violinist. Okay, he's like still stick boy generally speaking, but he likes to do chores around the house, but there's stuff he just cannot do, like digging ditches and stuff. He just dug ditches all summer and put down some pipes he wanted to put down. And he said, I could never have done that before because he couldn't work that long. So, gosh, my stupid husband and my stupid mom and my stupid family, I mean, is it just us? It's you. No. No, in fact, yesterday, I was just in Rapid City yesterday, and a native lady came up who had been at one of my workshops before. And she told me she had tried carnitine, and she had lost 60 pounds since she started that a year ago. And I said, that is so tremendously amazing. I mean, she wasn't skinny. She was just fine. She said, I was a big girl. And she said, but I never had any energy and I never could do anything, and now I can do more, and the more you do, the more you get more lean body mass and all those nice things. And I keep thinking about that. If you think that there might be a genetic component, which, duh. I mean, there's other components too, but there certainly are genetic components. Could native populations have trouble with that? I don't know. But they certainly have trouble with obesity and diabetes and obesity-related stuff in a larger proportion, and also so do black men and women have this trouble. So I think who are the Pima Indians? You know those Pimas? Remember those guys? Okay, the Pimas get a lot of flack because they are all fat. But you know, they have that thrifty gene. They live in the desert. They are genetically different from all the other Indian tribes. Did you know that? They didn't intermarry because nobody went to the desert. All the other Indians are like capturing each other and intermarrying, okay? But these guys have a very distinct gene pattern. And they are big time fluffy, and they get diabetes at the drop of a hat. Half the little kids in that tribe are obese, and have been for years. They're probably more than that now. But what people hypothesize is maybe they have some gene that says, hey, if you're going to live in the desert where there's like no food, you better say, there's a calorie, get it, keep it. And that's called the thrifty gene. What's really interesting now is they found a tribe of Pimas who live in Mexico in the desert. And they've been isolated, so nobody even knew they're out there. And they have the same genetic everything, but they work like dogs just to survive. And they're not fat. So what happens is, if you have a gene that says, for thousands of years we have had to really eke out a living here, so by God I'm good. And then you have them move next door to the 7-Eleven. I mean, with abundant food, that gene does not suit you well. I used to laugh about it when you know, 'cause as a fluffy girl, I would say, hey, yeah, well, I will outlast you at the Ice Age. You know, I mean, but you know, it's not a judgment. It doesn't need to be a judgment. Just figure out some people need a little help, and probably even if you did something like that and told them it was going to help, that might be a placebo effect. But I'm doing real stuff without that. So, all right, yeah.
Do you think the prevalence is increasing of deficiency, or is there?
No, I think recognition of deficiency is increasing. There's no reason to expect prevalence would change unless we found out that some kind of exposure to nasty stuff killed your ability to make that. But what it is that we just never recognized it. And you don't recognize it if you say, oh, we checked your blood, that's not a problem. Missed half right there. Or those babies are never even born. We never seen anybody like that. Those things change when you learn more stuff. And I can't tell you, I mean, I've told you maybe 5 or 6 kids' stories here. There's way more than that. Way more than that. One little baby, a Prader-Willi baby that came from a hospital across town, they'd put a G-tube in her, and they were feeding her, and here's something interesting, they're feeding her the national average calories for a baby. She didn't move. So by the time she came over to see me, because a nurse over there knew me, and said, go see Cathy, you know. Anyway, so she brought the baby over here, and she's this little pumpkin who couldn't move and couldn't suck and all of these things. And so we started carnitine with the doctor, of course. And the mom was like, oh my God, she's holding her head up. It was like 2 days later. She's doing things, she's doing really well. She looks great. But people, if you don't know what to look for, so, and I'm not seeing it under every bush, but there are some bushes out there. I wouldn't keep finding them. Another hand was there, yeah.
So have you treated like whole families?
No. Oh, well, that little boy, the fat little short boy, his mommy is no longer short and fat either.
So she took her.
Yeah. So yes, but only sporadically. I mean, most of the time the parents are not like that. It's like the kid has some kind of a odd gene pattern. But that one, the mom looked just like him, so yeah. All right, now it's 7:30, and I get to talk to you for like a half hour, right? So there's a whole lot of stuff we could talk about. Let me just see what I'm going to talk about. Okay, well, I'm supposed to talk tomorrow to like the public, but most of you are going to be there too, right? So I'm going to save talking about whole milk and some stuff about that that's really interesting until tomorrow, because that's something people can address. I couldn't talk about carnitine tomorrow, do you know? The 50 gene, we talked about that. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about some magnesium stuff, some vitamin D stuff, a little bit of stuff with, I think I should talk maybe now about a little bit about the glycemic index when that came out first. It came out in 1984. I know this because that's when I was doing a fellowship in Indiana. In '84, yes. So I forgot everything from that because I remembered it, but it's no good anymore because it was all wrong, you know. But I happened to be in Indiana University when that hit the fan, and it was like, whoa, it's interesting, you know. Now, my friend had diabetes, and she has type 1, but she got it when she was like 30, and she does everything just perfectly. She's a doctor of something, and she teaches in a college, and you know, she does it all very nicely. But she was telling me, she said, well, you know, if I eat potatoes at night, I will have this massive high sugar. And if I cut down to only like half the potatoes or 1/4 the potatoes, I won't have that. It's something about potatoes. And I believed her because she's not a liar. But the dietitian she saw said, oh, I don't think so. There's 15 grams of carb in a 1/2 cup of potatoes. We've all memorized those numbers, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we used to tell people that there was a big difference in the carbs, that short carbs were fast acting and complex carbs were long, they took longer. We totally missed the boat on that one. Complex does not mean long. It means all the micronutrients are there that came with it. That's what that means. So if you're eating the whole piece of grain and stuff with the fiber and the stuff, that's slower. But you throw some potato starch down there, boink. Anyway, so what happened is we didn't know how to believe people like that. We just told them they were probably wrong. And then at some point we didn't even used to let people trade exchanges. Remember that? I remember this one mom told me, she said, do I really have to take him to the pizza place after the football game and make him bring his milk and his vegetable and his fruit, and he can have 1 piece of pizza? And I said, who told you that? And she said, because he had all these exchanges, you know. She said, well, the dietitian told me that. And I said, well, you can actually count the carbs there, especially for occasional stuff like that. You say, okay, got 3 pieces of pizza, diet, pop, and eat some carrots earlier in the day or something, you know. But she said, the dietitian said, well, yes, you could do that, but don't you really rather that he would have good nutrition? Let's punish the hell out of this kid because he's got diabetes. Do all your other kids have to have good nutrition every single meal? You know, I mean, he needs to live in the world. He needs to have a good time and not feel like a weirdo. And sometimes we're so prissy about things, you know, just like that. Remember the first dietitian I ever met? I am one, by the way. I have that credential, but and I know that there's lots of perfectly nice people who are that. But the first one I ever met was at a WIC office, and she was mean. And mommies would come and put their head in my door and say, "Do I have to see the blonde lady?" So, no, come on in here. No. Yeah. But so sometimes we get all caught up in what we have learned is the thing, and then now we find out it's totally gone. Well, the glycemic index stuff came out in '84, and it doesn't solve all kinds of problems, but it does help us address things a little differently. And what you know that is that they compare 50 grams of some carb against 50 grams of glucose, and you look at the pattern. And so some foods are like boink, and some are like nah, okay? So it's not what they're made out of or whether it tastes good or anything like that. But what they try to do is if you're trying to prevent big high peaks, many peaks and high peaks, that's evil. That puts on weight, doesn't it? Because it secretes insulin. Insulin is also a growth factor. Very interesting. So if we could just like not do that so much, it would help people manage things better. That's one reason why for some people grazing through the day is actually better for them. I mean, it just, people are different. It doesn't have to fit everybody's needs. But when that came out, they started looking at some different things. One study that I really liked a little later, though, was pretty terrific. Now, I'm going to describe this study pretty well because we have to look at it a little closer. We had, not me, I never do any research. I read everybody else's, okay? A big raft of children who were 10 years old and who were all really, really fat. And they had all failed on every weight loss thing known to man in their city. They'd tried all these things. They're doing this thing. They're in a hospital. They put them in the hospital, and they gave them all 1,600 calories a day. However, these guys had a 1,600 calorie per day with a standard low-fat diet. These guys had a 1,600 calorie a day, but it wasn't particularly low fat. It was kind of like average fat, but all of the carbs were low glycemic index. Now, these guys lost something like 5 kilos. These guys lost 17 kilos in the same period of time. And so the question that I always get when I talk about that, somebody says, so everybody should be on the glycemic index diet, right? No, they should. No, I mean, the thing is, we selected a group of people who failed on a low-fat diet. We selected kids who failed on everything we've tried. We shouldn't be too surprised that if we try something quite different, we might be seeing something different. So, does every child need that? No, but if you've got one who's just like struggling mightily and she's been on low fat, I'm not eating any fat, I mean, that may not be the solution for her. And so, calories are equal in terms of their, if you were a, what is it called, a bomb calorimeter and you stuck them in there. But how you use them is often quite different. Yes?
In Australia, they actually post glycemic index on the labels.
Mm-hmm. That's cool, yeah. Yeah, now the difference between glycemic index and glycemic load is kind of useful for us to know generally. Like for example, is the glycemic index of a teaspoon of sugar pretty high? The index is, but how much do you eat? You know, so if it's a food that you eat of, it doesn't count the same. So the glycemic load is how much of an effect does this have in the amount that you might really eat. So sometimes if you say, I can't have that, it's a high glycemic index food. Yeah, but you're eating it with meatloaf. You know, I mean, so it's not such a big problem. Okay, so that's one of the things that some kids do seem to have weird stuff. Another little weird stuff thing that was, I actually learned these weird things in 2001. Somebody in Atlanta discovered that there are some fat kids out there. And so I was asked to come down and do a workshop for the state of Georgia on childhood obesity. It was brand new. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, fat kids, you know. And I didn't know about carnitine in those days either. And so I looked at the literature, and that's where I found that kind of thing and a whole big bunch of other stuff. And that's why I get really tired of talking about fat kids. Could you talk about childhood obesity? No. You know, what I really find interesting is people, you go to a talk on it and they're just telling you how many kids have gotten fat in the last 10 years. Do you see those slides after slides? They're fat, we know it. Now, what are we going to do about it is the question. But there are some studies that are quite interesting in terms of certain individuals behaving different ways. For example, one study they gave kids who were fat and kids who were not fat, matched in other variables, 100 calories worth of Kool-Aid before dinner. The kids who had normal weight cut their caloric intake at supper by about 100 calories. Voluntarily, they just ate less. These kids ate the same. Now, that made people think, is it possible that some people have a defect in the ability to recognize calories when they come in the form of liquid carb? And that's one of the things behind some of the stuff we're looking at now with, you know, not drinking tons of pop would be good, you know. But it's not just the calories of the pop. But there's something that some people are more sensitive to that. And there's been a bunch more things coming out just recently about people sensitive to that. So it looks like people are different. We certainly have another issue there too, which is if you're drinking the pop diet, you are not getting any of the nutrients you need to run that show. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about magnesium and some other nutrients in relation to that, because there's big problems there that occur in your TCA cycle because you don't have those things, and so you can't burn the calories in that form if they don't have stuff. And that's the concept, guys, of nutrient density, right? Nutrient density means per calorie, how much good stuff have you got? And if you eat a lot of foods that don't have a lot of good stuff but plenty of calories, even if you're not eating excessive calories, you can't burn them, okay? So those are the kind of things. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to talk about in what level tomorrow, but it'll be the same stuff but without the carnitine piece. Something just flashed to my mind about carnitine, but it left again. That's the one thing. I have this little problem because of the brain injury from the chemo. You know, you get 30 times chemo all at once, and I lived to tell about it, but I took a hit. So I will have, like, I will lose my track, and I'll say, what was I just talking about? And people help me out, you know, get right back on track. But one time somebody said, isn't that embarrassing? You're talking to 400 people and you don't know what you just said. I said, well, no, actually, you put it in proportion, don't you? Memory problems, dead. I mean, I had a 1% survival chance. Every day is gravy, you know? Don't sweat the small stuff. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what else. Oh, yeah, I'm going to talk about vitamin D a little bit tomorrow. Not because vitamin D is like a big fat deal. Some of you know I am the queen of vitamin D. And I am the queen of carnitine also. I'm out there yakking about it. But there's some D stuff that I just want to be sure you know what this connection is. It looks like muscle weakness is one of the things you can get from D deficiency. In fact, the number one way until recently, now that people, the number one assay in America today is a D level. Because you keep finding somebody who's crap and you go, oh God, I better look at her too, you know. And then it, so it's really being looked at, and down the road it's going to be like a hemoglobin where they're going to just be getting that because it's such a big fat deal. But in the meantime, one of the things, and there's tons of stuff vitamin D does, and it's cancer and heart disease and in all the autoimmune diseases and your immune system. But the piece I'm looking at is, a few years ago somebody was looking at grandmas falling down and breaking their hip. And they said, why does, you know, everybody says, oh well, her bones are fragile. Okay, but why is she falling down? Yeah. And that was a new question. And it turned out muscle weakness from vitamin D deficiency, just cutting to the chase, was causing her to have poor balance because her muscles weren't able to do that. Now, in the study that was looking at this, they gave people enough D to, I think they gave them 2,000 is what they gave them, and these guys got just the regular amount. And they cut falls in half at this nursing home. That's really cool. That saves tons of money. It also means that mom is out there enjoying her life more too, which is very important. But they didn't check anybody's blood level in that study. I was down in Nebraska talking at a long-term care conference this summer, and I'd done it just the year before too, and I told them that story. And this girl came up and she said, I had to come back this year to tell you this. We went home and we checked the D level on all of our patients in our nursing home. And I said, well, how were they? Were they okay? And she said, well, 2 of them were okay. The rest were totally not. And everybody who came to that nursing home, they poked them, checked them, and they fixed everybody. And they made sure they were okay. They weren't saying, this should be enough, fling, which is what we tend to do. So this is why you really need to get a level, guys, you know, because some people's levels in time, they have a good amount coming in, but it does not maintain normal in that person, and I see that all the time. But they cut falls in their nursing home by 70%. Wow. Yeah, so there's something there. Now, that's one thing. So, but muscle weakness could certainly get in the way of an exercise program if it's something else causing that too. But here's another thing. After that study was done, somebody had this clever idea. The heart is a muscle. So it turns out one of the things that they've looked at since is that a certain type of heart disease called congestive heart failure, which is poor pumping. You're just not strong enough to pump, fluid backs up, you drown. That's a really common heart problem. And multitudinous things can contribute to it. But what I'm telling you is, it looks like if you're also D deficient, you got another thing contributing to it, and it's harder to treat, and you maybe would even not have it if that was the only problem. So that's kind of interesting. The other thing I mentioned before is the diaphragm's a muscle. So all of those things you want to do, you can't if you don't have ability to burn the fuel, or the muscles are just losing it. I mean, there's a million things can cause it. So having all kinds of good nutrition is really important for a million reasons. There's tons of stuff. I should mention a couple little drug nutrient things because of you guys being healthcare people. Oh, just a sec. Okay. I should mention one thing. A lot of times kids that are fat are on metformin, and so are adults. And metformin specifically makes you not absorb B12. And that has been documented. The first time I saw that article, it said, this guy was published this, it said, "It is well known that 1/3 of people on metformin are B12 deficient." I'm like, well known to whom exactly? I mean, I keep my ear to the ground, and I had never heard that before. And his article was about, yeah, we know that, but here's why, and it looks like it's some kind of calcium in and out of cells down in the gut or something. But it's not something that I can guarantee you can fix with an oral take. If you just are missing acid because you're taking proton pump inhibitors, a multivite will take care of it, because a multivite does not require acid to be absorbed. Getting B12 from food does require acid. And so if you're worried about your grandma and she's eating a chicken leg and you're chewing away and you go, oh, she's good. She may not be good because the elderly quit making acid. That's one of the other things elderly quit doing. They get something called achlorhydria. It just means you don't got enough hydrochloric acid. And 1/3 of the elderly, when you do the most sensitive test for that, there's one called methylmalonic acid test. If you do that test, 1/3 of the elderly are walking around loose, B12 deficient. That's your mom. It's your grandma. I mean, that's a lot of people. And so we've got different things causing B12 deficiency. It is totally horrible. It causes homocysteine levels to be up. It means you can't even make DNA anymore down the road if you have it really bad. You have neurologic damage. And it used to be something that you had the autoimmune disease of intrinsic factor loss, pernicious anemia. That's a whole different guy. It is autoimmune though. But intrinsic factor is something that's in your stomach. But you know what? Whenever you hear the word factor, it means we don't have a clue how this works. Okay. Think about it. Intrinsic, something in there. There's stuff in there, okay? Actually, what it is I think of it like a mug handle. And you get this little B12, and it's a little tiny molecule. First you have to chop off this big glob of protein that's on there so it's small enough, and that's what the acid you need that for. Comes downstream, stick your mug handle on it, send it downstream, and right at the terminal ileum, right where the small intestine hits the large intestine, a little hand reaches out and grabs a mug handle and pulls it in. So, not really. But, really? No, but it's a good model, because what happens is, not having mug handles, you're not going to capture that stuff. Or if somebody screws up your terminal ileum, you can't pull it in. Or if the B12 is never removed from the big glob, so nothing can be done, it just passes through. So a whole lot of people are B12 deficient because of acid problems. Some people are on proton pump inhibitors, which means you have a whole new crop of young people with the same thing. And you don't start seeing symptoms till a couple of years later, because it's stored pretty well in your body. So the day you start on Prilosec, you no longer can get B12 out of your food. Now, if you're taking a multivite, you're good. But if you're not, I don't need no stinking multivite, right? Yeah. So that I was at a gastroenterology conference once, and this stuff was so exciting to me. And I was going to talk about it, but I was sitting by this rep from one of the companies. I don't remember which one it was. I love that too. And I thought, well, I'm going to use my time well here at this dinner. And I said, did you know that if people use your product consistently, in a couple of years, they're going to start having serious neurologic damage, some of which is irreparable, and they're going to sue your company for millions of dollars. Because that's where they live, isn't it? I mean, it's like, I don't care about those grandmas, you know what I mean? So I said,
but I said, here's what you can do. I said, B12 is El Cheapo. B12 is nothing. It's really safe, wildly safe, and the teeniest one of all. You could put a tiny bit in every single Pralisecnexium Prevacid Protonix that you got, and nobody would ever be injured from that B12 effect from your product. And he said something so memorable. He said, yeah, but if we did that, the other companies would just do it too. That would be fine. I know. I said, you still get points for being the first guy. You were the one that said, yes, we saved your life, and we told these guys to do it too. You know, but I mean, sometimes something so tiny, I don't believe in vitamins. You better believe in this one, because B12 in that form is screwed up if you don't get that acid, or the acid doesn't take that glob off of there. It has to be in the little form. If you're taking it and you got acid, or you got no acid, no sweat, as long as it's a little multi-pill, a little crystalline form. So you don't have to get a dipstick and check grandma's acid level or anything like that. Anyway, so that's a really big deal. There's a couple other drugs that screw that up too. Metformin being the one I just wanted to mention here. When I told you I sometimes get Prader-Willi kids sent to me who are like older, and they're really fat, and they're 14 and 15. And invariably they've been on metformin because they don't want them to get diabetes and some other stuff. I said, well, I'd like to get a B12 level check, please. Well, why do they need that? I said, because his drug will make him not absorb it, and I want to know how much trouble we were in. And every single one of them has been horribly deficient. Now, the reason nobody notices this is the kids are goofy. The kids have weird muscle tone, the kids have weird behaviors, the kids have odd everything, and so one more little thing is not in your radar. Kind of like my friend who had diabetes, the same lady I was talking about, she became B12 deficient because she developed pernicious anemia. And nobody looked for it because they figured her neurologic injury that she was experiencing, which was horribly painful and very debilitating, that, well, that's diabetes, that's neurologic pain. She did her diabetes well, but she had developed that particular autoimmune disease as well. So that's a rule. Anybody with an autoimmune disease of any type, arthritis, lupus, scleroderma, MS, diabetes, thyroid weirdness, all kinds of things. Looks like, oh yeah, Parkinson's, looking like that now. But a lot of them are things where you tell it to quit making something, don't you? Don't make insulin, don't make dopamine, don't make this. Anyway, what happened is that they didn't see that, and so you really want to look at other things like that. For example, in our diabetes clinic for kids, for type 1s and at least, we automatically screen for celiac because they have a much higher risk for that. And the combination makes it real hard to manage their diet, as you can imagine, unless you take care of that. So B12, what's the deal? You don't need to eat too much of it, but it has to be in a form you can get. If you're healthy and well and everything's great, you can get it out of food and it's out of meats and stuff, which is why really only vegans are the people we're worried about, right? But if you were in school, who would you hear about for B12? Vegans and pernicious anemia. That's like 6 people. Yeah. The old people thing is where you went, old people, tons of them. And people on PPIs and people on metformin. And we're having a lot of people on those drugs. Now, if you're just on a PPI, taking a multivite takes care of it, because you can just absorb that form. If you're on metformin, I don't know that you can get that or not, because the mechanism downstream is really not elucidated, and it's not up here with things that we know about. So, if it was my kid, he'd be getting a B12 shot. I wouldn't fool around with it. It's really dangerous. In fact, that's one of the things I worry about a lot is pregnancy stuff. We have so many people entering pregnancy B12 deficient. And when we see them first, we wait till they're pregnant and then they come see you. And then they say, oh, you're taking a vitamin? Oh, yeah. Okay, fine, no, B12's in that form. Okay, good. But we didn't say, have you been taking that all along? Or did you just start that like Thursday? Because if she's been on proton pump inhibitors for 2 years, giving her the multivite level is not going to cut it. And what we know from some studies is that when they've done that kind of thing, by the end of the term of the pregnancy, the mom has been taking a vitamin every day, and by the end her level's okay. But her baby is still hideously low. And it causes the same kind of birth defects as folic acid because it's the same pathway, methionine to cysteine pathway. And it causes homocysteine levels, and it causes all kinds of crap. Prevention is a really good thing. So you can always do a shot. If people don't want a shot, they have 2 other options. and one is to snort it, and the other is to put it under your tongue. Apparently those tissues can absorb some B12. The problem is, do you trust them to do that? I don't know about you, but I would forget to snort it, I think. I just would forget. I forget a lot of stuff. In fact, the vitamins and things that I take, plus any other meds, I take them all at once in the morning and let it fight it out in there. Because I won't remember later. That's the kind of memory deficit. I can't hold a phone number in my head. I can't remember, what did I tell them I was going to do when I got to work? My students all email me. They say, would you send me that thing? No. I love you dearly, but email me, and then I will send it to you. I will not remember. And so you just know who you are, you know. But it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be you do this just a certain way. But realize taking that multivite is a really good idea. How many of you take a multivite? 6, okay. I need to come to your home and make you do this, right? Oh, no. You know, you don't have to use an intact one if it bothers you. I have a grandma who she just passed away in February, but she was 100 years old. And she was an adopted lady from Ireland. She's a violinist, and we met her through the symphony. But she's been my grandma for 30 years. Mary, she has this wonderful accent. She cannot swallow pills to save her life. So for years, I've been buying her Centrum Kids Complete. Now, I'm telling you a generic is fine for your family, which it is. I say, generic's fine for your family, but for my grandma, I'm buying the brand name. But sometimes there's a reason you do that. In this case, it's because she says, darling, you know, I like that little shamu, you know. So she gets the little shamu. If she would only eat Rugrats, I would buy Rugrats. I mean, so find one you like. And a good way to get kids to take stuff, by the way, too, is to have them be involved in choosing. So like, you look out ahead of time and figure out some that you think are fine. Like, here's 3 or 4, and then they pick from one. Now here's the other piece. They take it home, and you put the kid in charge of you taking yours. They put them around the table, and then we all take them together. One family does this with such aplomb. It was wonderful. What they do is they put the vitamin around, and then they all take their pill and they all yell, I love you! Because you're saying I love you and I want you to live well. My poor husband has to take stuff, you'd imagine. He's got, yeah. But he has a box that says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I changed the label. It says G-O-O-D-B-O-Y. He's a good boy when he takes them. He calls them that too. I'm not a good boy, and waves them at me. One time I was talking about this, and you know, you realize I was in college in '68, and that's when the women's movement hit the fan, and the civil rights movement, and the Vietnam War, and all of those assassinations. And this was like a really turbulent time. But that women's movement thing hit us all like, hey, I could have had a V8. You know, we didn't realize it could be a mom or a nurse or a teacher, and nobody was dying to marry me at that point. And my dad told me I wasn't smart enough to be a nurse, and he should know. He went to the 8th grade. He just thought nurses were amazingly brilliant. So I said, okay, fine. So I was a high school English teacher for a long time. But anyway, you never know. But the point of that being, some of us moved on from those discoveries, and some of us are still there, and by God, we're mad, okay? And this lady jumped up from the back of this auditorium with a whole bunch of people, and she says, I don't think you should be putting those vitamins out for your husband. Men should take responsibility for their own health care. I said, well, that'd be cool, but here's the real question. Do you love him? If you love him, you put them out there for him, and he puts them out there for you. Because you're saying, I want you well, I want you with me. And it's not a contest, and it's not a religion, it's not, I don't believe in that. And I don't sell anything, and I never will, and cheap is fine. Okay?
Amen, sister.
Yeah. Oh, I'll just tell you a little bit about some gummy stuff, too, by the way. Gummy D products are terrific. Little gummy Ds have like 400 units in a strawberry gummy. And I learned about this when they first came out. A little boy who had been taking some drops that I'd been giving him came and he brought me a gummy D out of his pocket with lint on it, you know. Wanted me to try it, so I did. And it was good, it was really good. So the gummy Ds are great. There's nothing wrong with gumminess if that makes them go down easily. If you need them to take more than 400, you can give them 3 of those little gummies. That's really not a big deal, okay? But the liquid drops are fine. But some of the products, if you buy gummy multis, they don't have much in them. They take out everything that doesn't taste good. So if you compare like Centrum Kids Complete to Centrum Gummies, you'll say, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. A whole big bunch of stuff's not there. So when people say, oh, well, that's the only one he likes. Yeah, but it ain't enough. Now, I mean, so you have to make sure that they have something more complete. So some tools in your toolbox about different brands or techniques or way to get them involved in it is helpful. And the same is true kind of for those gummy fish oils. First of all, they're not fish. They are made of algae, and they have only DHA and no EPA. So they have some limitations in terms of why we want them to get this fish. The other big problem, though, that DHA is fine, and we're using it in research now with premature babies. It's doing really good things with premature babies. They're giving them 1,000 milligrams a day of DHA. Wow, yeah, whoa. The baby's not even that big, you know. And DHA is also looking huge in grandmas and making your brain continue to work. Because DHA is the primary fat of your personal brain, right? You know we're all fatheads, right? Yeah. Okay, but you're not going to have DHA there if you can't make it or if you can't get it. And what we now know is that some people can't make it. And it's way more common than we thought. That's why even like 10 years ago, 6 years ago maybe, the American Heart Association came out and said, you should eat fatty fish twice a week or take 1,000 milligrams of fish oil every day. It's like, what? I have to take fish oil? Why do they say that? Well, because we now know that some people can't convert from linolenic acid to eicosapentaenoic acid. EPA, think of that as Environmental Protection Agency. Okay. And then DHA, which is the big time brain one in particular, and some other stuff, also retinal stuff, so it's a big deal for macular degeneration and for babies too, in development of that. Those guys are not going to be present in some people in adequate amounts unless they are given some ready to rock and roll. The only place you're going to get that is fish oil. So if you're trying to get the whole works, those guys are just algae type. So like if you're looking at Expecta or some of those products, it's DHA for pregnant women, that's fine. It's the same stuff they add to baby formula. But it doesn't have EPA, so if you're looking for inflammatory kinds of things and some of that, you want the whole thing. The other problem I have with the DHA gummies is that they have very little DHA and a whole lot of money involved. They're really pricey per gram of stuff you get. And so you can use other kinds of things. I have one little boy who's absolutely nuts. He puts lime-flavored fish oil on his oatmeal. No one told him it tastes bad. I'm not telling him, because that little boy totally needs it because of metabolic stuff he's got, you know. But there are some things too. There's something called Core Omega. Have you ever heard of those? I don't sell anything. I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying there's stuff coming all the time. This is like a little ketchup packet, and it's nanotechnology. So the fish oil is so teeny. It's wrapped up in, totally encapsulated in really orange flavored capsules. But it's so tiny that it's pasty and smooth. It's not gritty. So you give the kid this thing and you go like that, or you put it on a spoon. And I give it to kids all the time to sample and stuff, and they'll say, "This is good, Mom." You know. Now I've tasted it, and it's like way too orange for me. I mean, but I have like adult taste as opposed to little kid taste, you know. Now they also have chocolate one, and I think there's probably a whole lot of other brands coming out. They were just the first ones. So there are some things you can do to get those kind of things into people. It's not related to weight particularly, but it is related to health, and a healthy kid is a good thing. I'm out of time. Okay, yeah.
Can I just make a comment?
And you bet.
You know, I so appreciate everything that you were saying, and you just cracked me up, Cathy, so thank you for being here tonight. But, because I think that we all, on a Friday night, need to smile and laugh and have fun.
Life is funny.
Yes, it is. But we were all kind of giggling here when you, our St. Pat's little group here, when you were talking about vitamin D and CHF. So I just have to tell you, and I don't mean to put Heidi on the spot, but I'm going.
Oh, that's right. She's the vitamin D queen. I'm not anymore. I'm just the princess. She's the new queen.
She was saying I'm queen too, but I just think it's really cool if you guys all just know about Heidi's study that she's doing here with the Heart Institute on vitamin D and CHF. So if you would just take 60 seconds, Heidi, to tell us what you're doing. I think that.
You want the microphone?
Yes, I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. Yeah, we're taking.
Here, let me give you this. Excuse me, can you scoot that in a bit? Thanks.
I do like a soapbox.
Well, it's fun to see what we're doing locally, you know, at a big level.
So we're doing a clinical trial here at St. Pat's, and it's related to CHF. We're giving. Are you here? Hello?
Oh, it's the camera one.
Oh, here. Like.
You can have both. Here.
So we're treating deficiency in CHF, stages 2 and 3, and we just started enrolling, and I'm pretty excited. We're looking to do 40 patients, and we're doing cardiopulmonary exercise testing and a few lab values, and we're not just giving a little tiny tiny bit. We're going to replete them. Yeah, we're given 10,000 units for 6 months.
A day.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Thank you.
That's great. Okay. Well, that's terrific. You have to realize that people don't experiment on folks casually, which means by the time they have been able to get this grant and get this thing up and running, it's because there was plenty of data suggesting this looks really interesting. And they've moved all the way now to the people stage, not just the monkeys and the kittens. So this is like really impressive. It's not like, I'm just going to try this. It's not like that. It's really terrific. Keep me informed on that. Okay, I think it's probably time for you to get to escape. But if you have a question, I'll answer it. Otherwise, you can just go and do whatever.